Okay, this video is chapter 30 from this book, Medical Reformation, and it's just going into a couple details, odds and ends about causes of cognitive decline. This chapter is kind of a long chapter, so I'm going to divide it into several parts, probably 3 parts. It'll be chapter 30A, B, and C. Okay, so we already had a couple lectures on cognitive decline, and by the way, the course of this book is basically like a semester, 2 semester class in nutrition and health, and I'm going to try to go through every single chapter in the book. Okay, so cognitive decline has many causes. In my experience, people always want one cause and one treatment, but that's just not how the world is. I routinely see patients that have 10, 15, 20, 25 things that are causing a cognitive decline. And it's wise to try to prevent each one. Each effort might only be 1%, but you do them all together in aggregate, you can get a big improvement, or you can have a big benefit to prevention. So what causes cognitive impairment? Making a person mentally slow, stupid, demented, decrease oxygen into the brain for any reason, especially high-fat diets because they stick the red blood cells together, decrease oxygen delivery. Sodium is a problem because it's a vasoconstrictor. It narrows the artery. It's the opposite of potassium and magnesium, which open up arterial diameters. Decreased glucose is something that people are getting, let's say, at night. This whole tight control of diabetes thing is pretty stupid. The tighter you control the diabetes, beyond a certain point, the worse off the patients are. And for example, now they've got continuous glucose monitors. They can check their blood glucose, let's say, every 30 minutes overnight. And what they found is a lot of people were over-treating their diabetes and becoming hypoglycemic at night. So if you then superimpose several harmful things, let's say they got sleep apnea, so their brain cells are a little hypoxic, have less oxygen than they need at night. And the same patients often with sleep apnea have diabetes problems, and they've overtreated their blood glucose, so then they're going to have a low sugar and a low oxygen delivery to the brain tissues at night. Not good. Okay, a lot of brain stimulants are excitotoxin. We talked about many of these. And manufactured free glutamate, when they overprocess a protein to free up its individual glutamates in there, especially casein, the milk protein, whey, the milk protein. Soy has a lot of gluten in it, gluten, the protein itself. And also, they often make it from corn nowadays because it's so cheap. Glyphosate's an excitotoxin sprayed on the non-organic soy, beans, and oats. Aspartame's an excitotoxin, a sweetener. Caffeine's an excitotoxin. EMF is an excitotoxin. Beta amyloid protein's an excitotoxin. When you eat a lot of fat, you get insulin resistance, leading to increased insulin levels in the blood. There's a enzyme, called a chemical, to remove the insulin. It's called insulin degrading enzyme. And basically, when that has to do more work to remove higher levels of insulin due to insulin resistance, then it's less able to remove beta amyloid protein, and they get increased beta amyloid protein. Beta amyloid as a protein can cause excitotoxicity. It can increase permeability of NMDA receptors in the brain, allowing more calcium into the brain cells. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is just show you more reasons why you want to avoid high-fat diets. Okay, psychological stress increases the same hormones as it increases cortisol and the catecholamines, adrenaline, noradrenaline. And basically, caffeine does the same thing. Sleep deprivation does the same thing. Other brain toxins like alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, toluene, diesel exhaust, cleaning chemicals, they all add up. And some food preservatives, we talked about that, especially in the context of being mitochondria inhibitors. So what I'm saying here is this is how a lot of people just get their brains destroyed, and they don't even have any idea what's happening. They're just like, oh, well, I'm getting older. Okay, obstructive sleep apnea, we talked about that. Dietary deficiency of potassium and magnesium. Yeah, what are people most deficient in? All the stuff that comes from plants. Potassium, magnesium, nitrates, the precursors for nitric oxide, and fiber and antioxidants. Okay, that's just the stuff that comes from plants. Those are the most common deficiencies in the nutrition of most Americans. Okay, head trauma. Head trauma is real common. Real common from football, from boxing, from some of these MMA sports, and from, of course, soccer. And it potentially can happen in other sports, in hockey or lacrosse and whatnot. Okay, Jill Bolt Taylor, her video, Stroke of Insight, was good. And the best thing about it, I thought, of the whole book was the idea that rehab wasn't just 3 months. It was go live with your mother and rehab for years. And she made an incredible recovery. She's got a good TED Talk video on the internet. Okay, brain infections. like syphilis, Lyme disease. Again, those can be dormant. Herpes simplex virus. You get increased flare-ups of cold sores if a person is stressed out, as if the virus could sense when cortisol levels are excessively high for a prolonged amount of time. A lot of people used to die from neurocephalus like around the late 1800s. Franz Schubert, the great composer, Gustave Flaubert, the writer, he was a scumbag. I don't like Flaubert. Guy de Maupassant, Gilles Tourette, he was a famous doctor. Nietzsche, Oscar Wilde, Churchill's dad. Okay, Churchill's dad, Lord Randolph Churchill. Al Capone, the bootlegger. Okay, spirochete infection with syphilis, that's called Treponema pallidum. Chris Christopherson, the famous country music singer, he was initially misdiagnosed as having Alzheimer's, but it turned out he had Lyme disease, and he got much better after his Lyme disease was treated. If you want to learn more about syphilis, there's a good book, How the Brain Lost Its Mind by Roper. He's a neurologist. It was a pretty good book. Okay, autoimmune diseases also cause brain damage, like multiple sclerosis, lupus, limbic encephalitis. The most common of these that I see is multiple sclerosis. It's still rare, but it's still more common than all these. Limbic encephalitis, I hardly ever see it. Once every couple of years. Hypothyroidism, that's pretty common, and that'll contribute to the whole problem. I gave separate lectures about that, what causes hypothyroidism, especially leaky gut with secondary development of Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, thyrotoxicosis. Medication side effects, some meds are prone to doing that. Psychiatry meds have a tendency to cause brain damage, chemical lobotomy. Proton pump inhibitors also lead to problems, not to mention just lowering your systemic nitric oxide levels. Heavy metal toxicities, aluminum's in the water. Aluminum is sprayed in the sky with the trails of you-know-what, chem. Lead, mercury, cadmium from brake shoes, that's why I won't sit in a sidewalk cafe next to cars. Iron, diesel exhaust is a brain toxin too. Iron, that's in fortified foods, it's in meats. Copper can be overloaded. Be careful. I don't recommend multivitamins for the reason that they'll often have stuff in there that you really don't want. Lack of vitamin B12, thiamine deficiency, like in alcoholics, lack of reading or intelligent conversation. You got to keep developing your brain. If you get lazy, because I know some people who, as soon as they graduated from med school, passed their boards, they never read anything else after that, never read a book, certainly, and they often become kind of stupid. It's called being a Gomer doc. It means get out of my emergency room, but the implication when applied to a doctor is that they're just kind of lazy, stupid, and mediocre, know just enough to get by, but don't really have any real knowledge. Okay, how can cognitive impairment be prevented? The same way for any of these. You just avoid the thing that causes it. Okay, so what's the first step to understanding cognitive impairment? Yeah, watch some of these videos, read some books, but I go through this a lot. And it's sad, but in America, the system is designed to make you stupid and docile. I mean, right from birth, the mothers are typically eating a bunch of junk food, non-organic processed food, drinking tap water with aluminum in it and estrogenic chemicals. Kids are often born by C-section, which limits their gut flora from the beginning. Quite often the mothers only take off 3 months or less, and then they go back to work, and so the kid doesn't get breastfed for very long. A lot of these infant formulas, they're in an aluminum can with a BPA lining. Those are both neurotoxic. Sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. Let's see what else. Oh, sometimes too. Parents mean well, but they don't know any better. They'll paint the kid's room when they'll welcome the newborn baby, but now the kid's inhaling paint chemicals, volatile organic chemicals that are circa inhibitors. And they often leave kids in front of TV sets, and there's all these special effects. If you want to put a kid in front of a TV set, the old VHS tapes are much better. An old, Walt Disney movie back when Walt Disney was good. Whereas the modern stuff, there's too many special effects like scintillating lights and stuff, strobe light effects. That's real bad for a kid's brain. Feeding the kids a sad diet. They'll go by what their parents eat. So if the parents eat healthy, the kids will eat healthy. As a child, kids are often sent to preschools and public schools where they're grouped together with all the same age, and that's a bad thing. Same age grouping is bad for kids because then they all just want to be popular, and all they care about is popularity, and instead of learning. You learn when you're around people that are older than you with more experience than you. And it's the blind leading the blind, okay? Children are supposed to be around older relatives because that's where you learn the most. When a kid's around their parents, they learn. I wish I had spent more time with my father and my mother. I would have learned more. The best essay on the intellectual development of children is Compra Chicos by Ayn Rand. And I know she didn't have any kids, but man, like I said, she's the smartest woman who ever lived. It's a great essay. And the gist of it is what I just said. When they're around all same age groups, nobody knows anything more than the other one, so none of them can teach each other or help each other, and it just becomes a popularity contest. And cell phones make kids stupid. They hold it to their head, they sleep near it, they just want to be with it all the time. They don't ever read a book again after that. High school teachers are mostly kind of automatons following a script, and they're real boring. And they just go by because that pays the bill, keeps you out of trouble, kind of like a doctor following the standard of care. Kids go to the public schools. Public schools teach them to be atheists, to disrespect their parents, and sort of lead them into this lifestyle value system of frivolity, Epicureanism. It makes them kind of weak. The books they read freshman year of high school make them stupid, like Julius Caesar, Great Expectations, Gag Me with a Mockingbird. Those are terrible books, and children should not be forced to read those books. They're not ready for those books yet. And the books a lot of times are indirectly an insult. This is all done on purpose to make the kids hate reading and to insult them. Okay, in school, kids will memorize all kinds of random nonsense and take a test and then forget it all. This is a waste of the children's time. And it's basically like making somebody dig a ditch, like Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman in the movie, where the warden made him dig a ditch, fill it back up, dig the ditch, fill it back up. And it's just a waste of their time. And when the bell rings, like John Taylor Gatto said, every hour you have to drop what you're doing, it tells you that the bell is a lot more important than whatever you're doing. Kind of sends a signal that life is meaningless. You know, homeschool students are so much more advanced than public school students. It's not even funny. Private school students are, a lot better off. And, if you look at the rich people, what do? They want to send their kid to a small private school where there's a lot of discussion, individual interest, and participation. And people say, oh, well, the kids learn social skills at a public school. Yeah, right. They learn the wrong ones: swearing, substance abuse, premarital sex. I actually wrote a book about how to help develop a child's brain called How to Raise IQ and Become a Genius, okay? And there's a lot of things you can do to help the kid. You have to believe in it, And the other thing I've seen is both parents have to agree. And like I said, my wife and I did not agree, and I think it caused problems that were to the detriment of the children, and it was simply because, there's something called the Hollingsworth rule, and if one person's IQ is 30 points above the other person's, the person's IQ, academic IQ, whatever it is for the context, for the domain, social IQ, they just don't understand the smarter person too well. And it was sort of like, it was hard for me ever to establish a policy with the kids because I was working all the time. Remember, I was a surgeon covering 3 hospitals, and so I would try to set something with the kids, and my wife would always think I was being autistic, obsessive, compulsive, crazy or something because she couldn't understand it. She's a doctor too, but I'm like a genius doctor. Okay, so what I was trying to say is I was trying to instill in the children kind of a philosophic sense of loving learning, like what my father gave to me. My father, he would always read every night and listen to classical music, and sometimes when we both had time available, we would watch these old dramas on television. We used to get the BBC, British Broadcasting Channel, and we'd watch these old movies like Tess of the D'Urbervilles, The Mayor of Casterbridge, these Thomas Hardy novels, and other sort of dramas in England, which were kind of classy compared to most other things. And I would even then read the books because I wanted to, discuss them with my father. And I think looking back, I didn't have the maturity to really understand those books, but I did develop a lot of vocabulary from it. And just being around my dad, I had a sense of respect for that sort of thing. Masterpiece Theater, Alistair Cook, all that stuff. There was some, decent stuff on television at that time. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is if you get that going in a child, a love of learning, a respect for learning, a respect for scholars, they just teach themselves. I was very sort of disillusioned by school when I was young. Man, I was always the guy looking out the window, bored out of my mind. But I didn't like school, but I loved reading and learning. And later on, that really helped me a lot. Okay, we talked about the problems with head trauma. I actually think if you get the kid to like reading, everything else in school will take care of itself. I want to talk a little bit more about helping kids develop intellectually. A lot of people think swimming is such a great sport. I don't, because I think they have a tendency to over-chlorinate the pools. And I remember when I was at Stanford, I never met a single swimmer who I thought was smart. Maybe that's a little bit unfair, but I just think inhaling all that chlorine every day, which is toxic, uh, makes swimmers a little stupider than they otherwise would be. Concerned mom. What about golf? Oh, so this is coming from dialogues. A lot of times, when I was discussing a subject, I would do kind of like a Plato's dialogue and have a bunch of people having a conversation. So, concerned mom is where this dialogue came from. Okay, and she'd say, how about golf? I do think golf's a good sport in the sense that you meet a lot of rich people, so you're around rich people. You see how they behave, what they talk about, how their manners are. The only thing I don't like is they spray a lot of herbicides on these golf courses to make them look perfect with no dandelions, and you inhale that crap when you're walking around on them. What sports do I think are best for kids? I think tennis and cross-country running are the best sports. Tennis, again, same thing. You're around a lot of rich people. You're at the tennis clubs. It's good for your fitness. You can play all your life. You can play against men. You can play against women. You can play socially in doubles. So it just works well with a social life. Cross country, I like it because the same determination that gets you to run your best, for 3 miles, also gets you to study more. There's a lot of self-discipline. You have to do the thing that you're supposed to do, even though you don't want to do it. That takes maturity, discipline, and it's also like studying even when you don't feel like it. So I think that's good. And some people say, well, what about marathoners? Do they have more atrial fibrillation? Do they have more problems? Well, cross country is only a 3 mile race. The longest race for adults that I would recommend is like 6.2 miles if they're real motivated. Now, don't get me wrong, some people really like running the long distances, but you don't have to be in good shape. You don't have to run at all. But it's a nice thing. I had like an Achilles tendonitis from running so much that I actually had to eventually stop running because of that, for the most part, other than like warming up in wrestling practice. Okay, another doctor here is a doctor who's trying to increase IQ is IQ doctor. The most common cause of cognitive decline in older people is apoptosis due to chronic mild hypoxia and metabolic dysfunction. SR is skeptical reader. What is apoptosis? Apoptosis is programmed cell death. Apoptosis means a gradual, that's a key word there, gradual death of a neuron such that it can recycle itself, and its internal components are put into vesicles. They're lined by membranes, and then they're reabsorbed by the macrophages and the microglia, the immune system cells of the brain. So that way the plasma membrane never lyses. The cell doesn't spill its contents into the adjacent extracellular matrix, so you never can see anything on a brain MRI. Even at autopsy, you just count there's fewer than expected neurons. And the fluid-filled spaces with CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, become enlarged. And that's the classic appearance of atrophy of the brain. Okay, and I say that too because I looked at tons, thousands and thousands of these cognitively impaired brains, and I really don't see, the characteristic pattern of Alzheimer's too often. I don't see multi-infarct dementia too often, and even the so-called little tiny strokes in the association cortex, periventricular white matter, centrum semiovale, corona radiata, I often don't see anything in those areas, and often I see very little there, so that's not explaining it. Apoptosis, of course, causes brain atrophy. And because I've seen it so much, I'm pretty confident that's what's going on with dementia. When you have a stroke, a sudden, complete loss of blood supply, the plasma membrane of the neuron will lyse, and it'll just release its contents into the extracellular matrix. So there'll be edema, then inflammation. You can just point to it on an MRI very easily and say, here's a stroke. But you can't do that with apoptosis. Hypertension is dangerous because you got this therapeutic window. Your pressure's too high, you can have an intracranial bleed. Your pressure's too low, you can have a stroke due to, hypoxia. And that's sort of like, being a mouse equivalent. The hippocampus is especially sensitive to hypoperfusion, lack of blood flow, hypoxia, lack of oxygen, hypoglycemia, lack of glucose. And part of that's because it's got very high metabolic rates, and so does the substantia nigra, which is related in the midbrain, related to Parkinson's. It also has glucose type 4 transporters, that's important, and it can't function well on beta oxidation of burning fat. It's not designed to do that. And then when it's already compromised by cytotoxicity, it's a problem. Okay. Um, some people think reactivation of herpes simplex virus from cold sores can contribute to dementia. Maybe. I'm not so sure about that, just because I don't think I've ever seen that as a history. I've seen acute herpes simplex virus infections cause brain damage, but I don't know what its relationship is to the chronic ones, but I kind of doubt that it's too common or significant. What causes hypertension? Of course, high-fat diets, high sodium diets, and then from eating processed food and meat, and then being low in potassium. Okay. What's the significance of magnesium? You need magnesium for all your ATP pumps. Okay, you can't run your sodium potassium ATP pump without it. And if you can't run that, you can't run the battery of your cells along their plasma membrane. You can't run your neurons. Okay, and more people, the problem is not so much high sodium, but a relative deficiency of potassium for causing hypertension and all the sequelae of hypertension. We're made to eat about 10 to 1 potassium to sodium, but most people are eating almost the opposite of that, opposite of what our ancestors ate. And that messes up their plasma membrane gradients. The body has to do all kinds of compensatory maneuvers to reestablish those gradients where it wants them. Why does high sodium cause hypertension? Because it's a vasoconstrictor and inhibits endothelial nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is made in endothelial cells, the lining cells of the artery, and it pushes some into it's a gas, nitric oxide. So some pushes into the lumen of the vessel, and it has an antiplatelet, antithrombotic effect. Some goes posterior into the wall of the vessel, into the vascular smooth muscle cells, and gets them to stop contracting. Okay. Neurons dedicate, in the ballpark of 50 to 65% of their energy to running those ATP dependent potassium sodium pumps on their plasma membrane. So it's a real big deal to get that plasma membrane voltage gradient and electrochemical gradient established. Why is hypokalemia not that common on blood tests? Well, most potassium is intracellular, and the blood tests often have an artificially high range. It's probably best to keep it above 4 or higher, rather than saying 3.5 is good. People are better off with serum potassium levels above 4. Plant foods routinely have potassium to sodium ratios of greater than 10 to 1, so you get a lot from that. Is it dangerous to eat too much potassium? Well, for most people, they would just urinate it out of their system if they have functioning kidneys. Somebody who's got kidney problems, though, they might need to talk to their urologist to help them manage their electrolytes. Okay, we're going to call it there for today. This will be the end of Chapter 30, Part A. We'll take up with the next one real soon, so I hope that was helpful.